Now, just a warning here at the start that there will be spoilers for the latest episode of The Mandalorian in this video, which is the 8th and final episode of Season 2 or Chapter 16. So if you have not seen it yet and you don't want anything ruined, it's a really good time to click away. Okay, so back after that first episode of Season 2 during my review for it, and of course we learned in that episode that Boba Fett was back, which was obviously very exciting. I said I try not to get too excited and gush about stuff in my videos, that I like to maintain, I guess you could say, a certain level of professionalism and have something more interesting to say about an episode than, oh my god, that was the coolest thing ever. However, the first thing I have to say about this latest episode is, oh my god, that was the coolest thing ever. It was incredible to behold, and I've been waiting since 1983 when I was 5 years old and saw Return of the Jedi in the theater to see what we just saw in this episode of The Mandalorian. To see something that, and I'm sorry I have to go there, but that the sequel trilogy failed to give us, which is just one moment where Luke Skywalker truly gets to shine and showcase his abilities, something besides him projecting himself across the galaxy, which, yeah, it's impressive, but in a different way. And even though I'm not going to say anything too crazy like I can now die happy after seeing that, even though I can, I do somehow feel more complete after seeing that, which maybe sounds just as sad, I don't know, or really care. And again, I really don't want to go there right now. I'm sure I'll make a whole video about it at some point in the near future. But one scene like that with Luke Skywalker was all I ever wanted out of the sequels. So many people seem to think that myself and other fans of Luke wanted to see him be godlike in those movies and to do everything and to be the ultimate hero once again in the end. But I just needed and wanted one scene like that, where what he does is impressive, most impressive, but it's not the most ridiculous or over-the-top thing ever. I mean, we've seen Anakin do similar things in the Clone Wars to battle droids or super battle droids, the same that Luke just did to the Dark Troopers, basically. In other words, it wasn't anything too insanely powerful. It was just right, I thought at least. And you can call it fan service if you like, I know plenty of people already are doing that, but it makes sense that he'd be the one to come for Grogu. It wasn't just thrown in there without purpose. This is the time period that Luke would be rebuilding his Jedi Order and searching for new students. So of course, when one as powerful as Grogu reaches out to him, or reaches out through the Force, he's going to answer. And I just love that he was once trained by Yoda, and now he's going to train one of his species, that it's going to come full circle. And it's interesting to note that along the way, along this incredible ride that was the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian, we learned nothing new about their species, Yoda's species, I mean. They're just as mysterious as ever, which I both somehow love and hate. And certainly the icing on the best cake of all time here was when R2-D2 came rolling in, and then he seemed to be kind of what started to make Grogu comfortable with the whole idea of going with Luke. And you can see throughout the battle, which is basically just Luke decimating the Dark Troopers, that Grogu understands what's going to happen, why this guy is here. And he knew he'd have to go with him even if he didn't entirely want to. He did want to stay with Din Djarin, but he knew and understood it really wasn't his place, and Din Djarin realized the same thing. So anyway, what an amazing scene all around. From the start where one X-Wing shows up and Cara Dune makes her comment about one X-Wing, great, we're saved. And though she's being sarcastic, we the audience understood just how right she actually was, that they are about to be saved, because at that point, there was only one character it could be in that ship. And no, I'm not talking about Dave Filoni's character, Trapper Wolf, though considering what he's done for Star Wars, along with Jon Favreau and everyone else behind the show, he should be almost as big of a hero as Luke Skywalker in the fandom at this point. Because I can't help but feel like they gave us Luke Skywalker back. And for that, as a fan, I'm very grateful. But before I end up gushing too much here, let's dig into the episode a bit more, because there's a lot more to discuss than just the return of Luke Skywalker, not the least of which is the departure of the child, and maybe the departure of Din Djarin from the series as well. I don't know, we'll talk about that post-credit scene in a bit and what it could possibly mean. And if you're saying right now, what post-credit scene am I talking about, I would suggest pausing the video and going to watch after the credits. Anyway here, even though I've been called by some everything from crazy to just plain stupid for saying, as far back as last season, that Baby Yoda would be gone come the end of this season or that the two would separate, that's indeed exactly what happened, and it couldn't have been handled any better than it was. It was so perfectly bittersweet to have this awesome moment where Luke comes to save the day, and you want to cry tears of joy. And then you realize what he's actually come for, and that Grogu is going to leave with him, and that Din Djarin has to say goodbye, and they become tears of happy sadness, if that even makes sense. Again, it's such a bittersweet moment. It's such a bittersweet last few minutes of that episode. It was an amazing roller coaster of emotions that somehow leaves you happy and sad at the same time. And things like Din Djarin taking off the helmet for Grogu was great, especially after we saw him trying to get a peek under it a couple episodes back, letting us know that he too is curious about what he looks like. And I couldn't help but think or hear Anakin's line from Return of the Jedi when Mando's helmet was coming off that, "Just this once, let me look on you with my own eyes," which got me thinking about what Carrie Fisher had once said, that Star Wars is about family, which is why this show worked and worked so well. It was about a bond, as strong as a family bond, between Grogu and Din Djarin. And though, sure, plenty of other stuff happened and was introduced and will now spin off from everything we saw in this series, that's what the story was always about. It was always about Din Djarin and Grogu, which is why I think this book has been closed, and why Boba Fett will now be the focal point of the show The Mandalorian going forward. At least that's how I interpreted the post-credit scene, though I could certainly be wrong. It could be that The Mandalorian and the Book of Boba Fett are two different series. I don't know if any sort of official clarification has been made about that. At the time of recording this, I haven't heard anything. However, I do find it odd that the Boba Fett show wasn't announced at the Disney investor presentation last week, and that it will be coming out in December of 2021, and that The Mandalorian Season 3 was said to be coming out Christmas of 2021. I just don't see them overlapping these two shows, but again, who knows? And I'm certainly fine if they are two separate things, but I honestly don't think that'll be the case. And speaking of that post-credit scene, it was so awesome to go back into Jabba's palace. So much Return of the Jedi love in this episode. It was great to see that Bib Fortuna had taken Jabba's place in more ways than one. He's both running the criminal empire, it seems, or was, and that he was fat and sitting atop a throne. But of course, Boba Fett shot him and yanked his body off the throne and took his place, and Fennec Shand was at his side, so I'd imagine we'll be seeing these two rule over the criminal underworld. And along a different line here, I yet again really enjoy the Boba Fett theme music in this. It's different, but it just really seems to work for the character. And speaking of Boba Fett, I do have to mention the passing of Jeremy Bulloch, the original man in the Boba Fett armor. It's almost this strange, crazy irony that he passes away the day before this episode comes out, when Boba Fett would be putting a resounding stamp on his triumphant return to Star Wars, if you will, again by taking up the throne of the criminal underworld. And I truly hope Mr. Bulloch was able to see and appreciate what Tamora Morrison was doing and bringing to the character, and may he rest in peace. Moving on then, let's talk a little bit about the Darksaber and how Din Djarin is now the rightful ruler of Mandalore, it seems. And I think there may be some confusion about why he can't just give it to Bo-Katan when Sabine basically did the exact same thing in Rebels. And I think the simple answer is Sabine was never the rightful ruler or had no claim to it. Since she didn't win it in combat, she didn't beat Darth Maul for it. And you might then say, well, Bo-Katan would have no rightful claim to it either if it was given to her by someone that didn't win it, which I think is part of the problem and why she's so reluctant to take it again now, and why she wanted to be the one to take it from Gideon by defeating him in combat, because then it would obviously be more legitimate, and even more legitimate than the first time she had it after Sabine had given it to her. I'd even imagine there were those Mandalorians who questioned her original claim as ruler, since it was indeed given to her. She never actually earned it or won it herself, so having it given to her yet again wouldn't sit well with those same Mandalorians. Though certainly a story could have been made up about how she had been the one who actually defeated Gideon, but I think Bo-Katan has too much pride and honor to lie about that, as well as too much honor to put on maybe a sort of fake duel with Din Djarin, where he purposely loses and yields it to her. Either way, it's an interesting storyline that seems like it should take place in Season 3 of The Mandalorian, even though Season 3 might be about Boba Fett, or maybe it's split between the two. Maybe we'll get a larger, longer season. That might be wishful thinking. Or maybe we should take this as evidence that there will indeed be two different shows. And I'd have to imagine in the coming days, if they haven't announced it already, we'll get some clarification on all of this, likely when this will be a little less spoiler-like to talk about. Not that people care about spoiling it for others these days. The internet is already littered with videos and articles talking about Luke's return. But anyway, another thing to talk about here is that no, those who thought whatever secret project we saw being worked on in those vats a few episodes back seems to have nothing to do with the Dark Troopers. Dr. Pershing even says the human inside was the final weakness to be solved, meaning they're not trying to perfect something with living beings, making them force sensitive. They were just trying to make really good droids, which they've already pulled off. Nor does it seem like Gideon wanted the child in order to give himself force powers, which is another theory I saw some floating, and one I wasn't a fan of because I don't want people to be able to inject themselves with high M count blood and suddenly be force sensitive. I'm just not a fan of that idea at all, even though that's probably somewhat where they're going with it, because I still believe, and I think it was almost confirmed in this episode, that they wanted Grogu or his blood in order to create Snoke or something along those lines. Moff Gideon did say his blood was all they were after, and that it had rare properties that he hopes to bring order back to the galaxy with, which I think is absolutely a reference to the coming of the First Order, which would, of course, include Snoke. Which leads back into that question of, will everything flow into the sequels as we know them, or will things be changed? Maybe minor things, maybe big things. Was bringing in Luke and doing what they did with him in this episode a one-time thing? A way to give fans that one moment I think a lot of us were hoping for? Or was it a hint at a course correction? Only time will tell. As for the episode itself, minus all the revelations and cool appearances and all of that, well, I thought it was really good, not the greatest overall in that department. It, of course, had great action, it hit on so many different emotional levels, and it was terrific to see the story of the Mando and the child come to an end. Not that I don't think they'll ever see each other again, Din Djarin did promise they would, but it really did feel like these 16 episodes or chapters make up one larger, well-told story that was, again, about these two, which is why it sort of ends here with their parting, and why their individual stories will pick up elsewhere, I believe. There were certainly other little things in there that I liked as well. They tried to do a bit more with Cara Dune towards the beginning after they boarded the shuttle, and the pilot tells her how he watched Alderaan destroyed, but then also saw the Death Stars blown up, which led to many, many more deaths, and he sees the rebellion as terrorists. I clearly think they're trying to lay a little bit of the groundwork for this Rangers of the High Republic series, which will no doubt feature Cara Dune. I really, really liked the interactions between Boba Fett and Bo-Katan, how she says he's not a Mandalorian, and he responds he never claimed to be, which I wonder if that will have anything to do with Season 3 of the show, assuming it is Boba Fett who will be taking over the title role. And if I had one little nitpick, and you know I always do, it's that Bo-Katan was just sitting on the bridge instead of looking for Gideon, which is one of the main reasons she went in the first place. Yes, she wanted the Star Destroyer as well in order to help retake Mandalore, but as soon as it was secure, I'm not sure why she wasn't searching the ship for Gideon. I mean, without the Darksaber, she can't unify her people in order to fight for Mandalore anyway, so I just kind of found that odd. Still, that doesn't by any stretch ruin the episode, not in the least. This was probably the happiest Star Wars has made me since I was a little kid in a movie theater in 1983, which is no disrespect to the prequels or the Clone Wars or anything else that has come out in the meantime. So much of it has been terrific since then, don't get me wrong, but seeing Luke Skywalker like that again, seeing him as he should be, as we always envisioned him to be, that was something very special. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. Even though I feel like I've only scratched the surface of this episode, and I'm sure I'll be talking a lot more about this episode and Season 2 in general in the coming days, weeks, and months, until next December, likely. Either way, though, now it's your turn to tell me what you thought about this latest episode. How did you feel about the return of Luke Skywalker, or that Grogu and Din Djarin are now going their separate ways, or what went down with the Darksaber, or anything else that happened in this episode? Whatever the case may be, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.